Oh, okay. Boa tarde, good afternoon, and good morning to if you're on the other side of the world. And I will start with an English presentation, but we can, if there is a need, we can speak a little bit Portuguese, and I will translate to John Norcini. First of all, thank you all for being here, and I would like also to thank my esteemed colleagues Eliana and Professor John Norcini for being here and to do this webinar on why the importance of masters in medical education, and we will discuss some questions about what is the importance and what is the scope and what are the differences between countries and actually European and other types of masters. And I will welcome everybody. And if you're willing or if you need to have some questions to our guests, please send them to me and then through the chat box, and then I will put it in the webinar whenever there is an opportunity for that. Boa tarde a todos e bem-vindos a este webinar sobre os mestrados em Educação Médica. E vou passar a falar a maior parte do tempo em inglês para poder traduzir para o John Norcini, mas depois poderemos sempre falar em português se houver essa necessidade. So there's before we can go here, can just everybody hear me? If you don't have if you have any kind of problems with connections, please let us know and we will try to solve them, okay? Good. So I have a few first questions to Eliana, and Eliana, please, if you're okay with English, that's okay. If you prefer to speak in Portuguese, that's good. Well, and the first questions are about what are basically the relevance of having a master's in medical education, and what do you feel about this, and what would be the main differences, the potential scope and purposes, and the differences between countries. Okay, so please feel free to talk explain us this a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very important issue because, in fact, a lot of differences in educational system in general, particularly in Brazil, it's very different from North America and even Europe. So in terms of the Master of Medical Education, well, let's remember that Brazil has spread the number of medical schools in an unimaginable way in the last 10 or 15 years. And we have never been prepared, I would say, to act as professors or preceptors based on the best evidence or the best practice. And what happened is with the expansion of medical schools, this need became even more intense, of course. But there is a big difference. When you are in Brazil, we have a very huge and let's say strong system of institutions that are considered the public institutions, so the federal or state institutions. In a way, to enter these institutions, you do need an academic degree. And for us, the academic degree requested is the PhD. But in our system, people go to master and then PhD, mostly. So master for us is mainly the way to go in an academic title, in an academic degree, to then become a professor into an university. The term that we use for things like a title that give you more expertise in certain areas, but don't prepare yourself for the research that is related to this area. We call this in Brazil especialização or specialization. So Portuguese people will understand easily, but the people outside, they may call graduate courses that are sensu lato. So there's a lot of confusion about the names. So talking about two different groups of people. People who want the title because they work in public institutions and they do need academic titles. Master goes in this way. It's necessary for medical education. It's necessary because it's a new area to be developed in Brazil. But there's another group of people who are trying to be more experts in the area, to work in situations that they don't need the academic title as the others. But in fact, what happened in Brazil, both go to the same side. Everybody goes to the academic side. So we have a very big mixture. But I want to highlight one more point before I stop talking a little bit about Brazil. In 2010, we had a special call from our research center, National Research Center, to increase very rapidly the number of graduate programs offered. So we call this program Pro Ensino em Saúde. Okay, so Pro Ensino in Health, something. This initiative was very important because it interacted with mostly this public institutions, the big universities, the top university in country, and everybody put some project, and many were approved. More than 20 were approved in the first round. What happened is that in this last 10 years, we now have many more opportunities than we had before. So I wanted to make this point because I think it's very important to understand from the academic side in Brazil and the difference between what the public is looking for when you are working in these institutions and eventually when you are not in public institutions. So to start.
Okay, great for the explanation. John, do you have any comments on this, or do you?
Yeah. Well, I think Eliana has eloquently explained Brazil, but I think the things that operate in Brazil also operate in many other places, many other countries around the world. The number of medical schools internationally have increased dramatically over the past decade or 20 years. And as a consequence of that, there's not enough expertise to go around in education. And so I think one of the real advantages of having a master's degree program, and part of the reason these programs have proliferated around the world, is to meet that increased need for expertise in education. So I think that's a near universal situation around the world. The only other thing I would add to what Eliana said is that I think for someone who wants to make a difference, education is especially medical education, is a really wonderful place to work. There aren't many places in the world where you can influence the development of 100, 200, 300, 400 physicians and other healthcare providers. And they, in turn, take care of hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of patients. So what education offers the opportunity to do is really wonderful leverage. It offers you an opportunity to have an influence well beyond what you could otherwise have on the healthcare of thousands, tens of thousands of patients.
Great. That's a nice comment about the relevance and the importance of basically looking for the best practices so that we can actually impact on the health outcomes from our patients, but also from the system in general and the society in general. So why do you think, and maybe this is towards maybe to John, why do you think that this is so relevant? Because it seems in general, maybe this is a biased view, of course, that there is a very high, how shall I say this, strong concern about the quality of medical education in general, and masters for this type of area is really exploding in terms of its offer, but also in terms of quality. Why do you think that this is so relevant for people in general to look for this? It's just a question of having the best practices, or do you think there are other consequences for not doing the right thing?
Oh, I think not doing the right thing accrues to the quality of patient care directly. And I think that's really the key. The key here is to make sure that folks are using the kind of science and the kind of expertise they need in order to create healthcare providers broadly that can take care of people in their communities. So I think that's the central piece. The other thing I would add is that over the past, say, 30 years, 40 years, certainly my career since I'm an old man, throughout this period of time, the amount of research underlying medical education has increased dramatically. When I first got into the field, there was one, maybe two journals in medical education. Now they're everywhere around the world. There were one or two conferences around medical education. Now there are hundreds every year around the world. And what that's done is it's created an evidence base and knowledge that we can use and apply to improve the quality of care. And so I think that's really critical, and that's why a degree like this is important.
Good, great. Eliana, do you have any comments, or do you?
Sure, I do. I think, yes, the focus on patient care and safety, I think it's the fashion one now, and it's necessary to be. But I have to remember another point from the perspective of the faculty members. Also, being part of these programs is a kind of vitality injection or shot for faculty members. So people will found their team, you know. I remember, John, when I was in Faimer for the first time, I said, well, I found my people. So you understand why are you so committed to education when you start talking among the educators that are trying to be more scientific based, because our language in our areas of expertise is all about research-based evidence and etc. And that when it comes to education, something all from, particularly from Brazilians, from my heart. And so we need to put this much more on another level. So talking to this, the critical view of education that helps to improve, you need to be in a program like that, more organized program to get it. Because you can have one workshop here, another workshop there. You can have videos by yourself. Now you have lots of ways. But when you have an organized program that has objectives, you know where, you know, and someone knows where they want to go with you in terms of competencies, it does make a lot of difference. And one other aspect that I want to highlight is that when medical education advances so rapidly, have been advancing in the last 20 years in terms of research and the academic side, so academic medicine for some, it is attracting and inspiring other professionals in health. And recently I had a good experience trying to move from the house to other areas of knowledge into the university and trying to make the people understand this movement in medicine. And it's so advanced compared to other areas of knowledge in higher education that is really amazing. So I think it's also a good example and impulse to move forward other professionals as well. So it's very nice to see the growth curve. That is, as John said, he started when one or two were there. I started many more, but I see now a difference. First time I was in AME, we are 4 Brazilians. Now, when you go to AME, Brazilians are one of the big groups that go to the conference. So just to give you an idea of the impact in our reality.
Great, thank you. So I feel that I totally agree with you that when you're kind of focused on these, you're very keen on finding your tribe, you know, the group that thinks like you about what is providing the best practices for medical education. And actually there is this common mistake that if you're a medical doctor, you already know how to teach medicine, which is not true, and it's the same for every other type of knowledge area. So it's similar to education. Just because you're teaching some classes does not necessarily mean that you're actually doing a good job. You need to have proper training for that. Okay. Also, considering what you were saying, when you look at these type of programs, structured programs, one of the things that I think I heard from you, Eliana, and I would like you both to comment, is about the networking that you can actually establish within the participants of a training session like this. I was thinking about, we have a very good master's in MBA here in Nova, which is in the university in Lisbon. And one of the good things that they say is that their selling point is not the knowledge or the toolkit, is basically the networking of people that people meet as a participant, but also, of course, with the faculty members of those programs. Can you elaborate this a little bit or comment make on this? Maybe John, you can start, or Eliana. Eliana, go ahead, yes.
Okay, I will. Well, John is kind of responsible for my very intense experience with the program Faimer in Brazil. That was the first big initiative that really put people together as a community of practice. Brazil had other experiences before, but the intense connection that we were able to make among these 300 people who were trained in this specific program, that it was not a master, it called it a kind of a diploma course, made a lot of difference, not only for institutions and people, but made difference for the policies in Brazil. The Minister of Health called this community to help improve and qualify the process in different initiatives that they had in terms of medical education. So I want to say that. So my emphasis here is that, yes, when you really created these communities of practice, and they are networking in terms of the classical way to see from literature, but people do help in terms of, you can move from one institution from the other because you have news into the group, but also when you have problems inside. So all the exchange that happens and lasts long makes a lot of difference. And one program like a master that has in Brazil 2 years, make people be very comfortable with each other and create this community of practice. Of course, we have to nurture some way. And so, yes, I believe that more than the knowledge programs, graduate programs, they might create a very strong community of practice, regardless of the area, because then you really have this network of supporting many senses. And it was really very helpful. So yes, it's my comment now.
Thank you, Eliana. John, do you have any comments on this, or do you want to elaborate?
Well, I just want to emphasize what Eliana said. I think creating a community of practice is the first and most important thing that can be done. The group will ultimately contain all the kinds of expertise that are needed. And at the end of the day, if that community is created and those relationships are created, the participants in the community can call on each other when they face challenges. And that's really a key piece of this. And that's why Faimer started with a program that essentially created a community of practice. At the same time, it's really useful if in that community, there is, in addition, there are a group of participants or folks who have acquired the necessary expertise, and I think that's what a master's program does. So a well-functioning master's program should, one, create that community, but it should also provide the level of expertise needed to take the community forward.
Great, thank you. Now I have a few other questions for you. So what do you think are the emergent areas in terms of research in medical education in general? And also there is this big focus on medical education from the medical doctor side, but I think, and I believe, truly, honestly, I believe that this is transposable to other healthcare professions like nursing and practitioners and other types of health-related professions. Some of them don't even exist in some countries. I mean, in Portugal, we are very strict in our organization, but other countries like the United States and even Brazil are more flexible in terms of health professions. Can you comment a little bit on this, Eliana, maybe? Can you comment on this? What do you think are the emerging areas in terms of research in medical education?
Well, I think it would be great to start with John this time, but what about? Start, John.
Yes, ma'am. I'll start. So what I'll do obviously is focus on assessment in general, and I think there are two areas in assessment that I think are important and emerging. One is to begin to think about assessment from the perspective of formative and summative, and in particular focusing on formative assessment and the implications that has for learning and the ability it brings to really create knowledge and create learning. So I think that's one area of research and practice that I think is absolutely critical. Second piece is that there's been a shift in focus historically in terms of assessment. We've thought about individual measures and the characteristics of those individual measures. I think that thinking more broadly about assessment from a systems perspective is important. And I think it offers considerable advantage in a variety of ways. So I think from an assessment perspective, thinking about learning and formative assessment, thinking also about systems of assessment are important. I'll take a little step beyond that and talk a bit about the third area that I think is absolutely crucial, and that's interprofessional learning and collaboration, and the ability of something like a master's degree to bring people together from different professions to begin to share ideas as Eliana and you have spoken about. So I think that's really key going forward. There's lots of good evidence that collaborative practice improves the quality of patient care, and that's what we're about. So trying to instill that in students, creating that, working together as professionals, I think is absolutely essential going forward. And it's a wonderful area of research because we don't do it well right now.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Liana, please.
Yeah, I can make some few comments to complement or to highlight other issues or the same issues, but I think that the understanding that we are now talking about systems of assessment is one of the big challenges and in research and in practice as well, because it's totally unacceptable now to understand people being assessed in reductionist way, I would say. So I would emphasize this area because I think it's very important. Another point that I want to highlight is we shouldn't forget the big change that the pandemic brought us. So the change in teaching and learning, and as well as in assessment related to the more use of the digital resources. And this need development for the best practice. But again, I think it's an area for development, how we can make the best use of digital support in terms of assessment.
Great, thank you. This is actually an area that we are working a lot here, and I've been leading this effort on the automation of assessment, mainly focus on the automation towards formative assessment. So using things like automated item generation and computerized adaptive testing to basically bridge a gap between what is the delivery of content until people train enough to get to the, let's say, the certification or licensing step where they actually go for the assessment. Let me ask a provocative question, maybe perhaps first to John. John, do you think that in the future there will only be formative assessment and using this kind of profiling formative assessment as a measure of students actually getting to the outcome that you want?
No. I don't think it's a good idea to have only formative assessment. I think there is a need to protect patients, and I think that need is paramount. And as a consequence, I think that there will remain forever a role, and an important role, a central role, for summative assessment. Patients need to be protected, and you can't do that with formative assessment. Formative assessment is focused on students and what they learn. That's appropriate, that's good, that should be 80% of the assessments that occur should be, I just picked that number out of my head, that should be 80% of the kinds of assessments that are done. On the other hand, I think it's absolutely critical for patients and for those who pay for healthcare that there be some form of assurance and quality assurance that's built into the system. And I think without summative assessment, you just don't do that.
Thank you. And Eliana, what is your view on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's similar, but maybe I will start from the side of being a faculty member. So I think formative assessment is absolutely necessary, and in a way that also not only helps people to better develop doctors, but to make, again, faculty members to understand their best role, because their responsibility is very big and has to be clear for them during the process of making assessment and discussing feedback and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a developmental tool for the institution. Not only for students, not only for patients. I think it's very important for to qualify the institution. Anyway, we know that evaluation needs some external eyes. So it's necessary also to have some external eyes. As an example, in Brazil, we are organizing, we have organized lots of small or bigger consortiums, and we are working in progress testing as a consortium. So many schools, then we can kind of have an idea of where we go in our school with the group of students. So show us a little bit of our program. In Brazil, the situation in Brazil now is really, really very bad in terms of our national evaluation system. We are in a big crisis now. What means that, yes, we do need some external way to assess the quality of the professionals as well as the quality of the institutions. What I am very, I carefully say that because we can put all the responsibility over students when we are not putting enough responsibility over institutions that are being opened like popcorns in Brazil. So what means that? Means that we do need a very strong system on guarantee the quality of the institutions as well as the quality of the professionals. So I'm so a little bit more in a more safe space on saying, on putting stress on the responsibility of institutions and who is saying that and who is evaluating that. And in Brazil, at this point, we are in a very bad situation. So very bad if we start from the students, because it will be a disaster with all this expansion that we had recently.
Thank you. Those are very good comments. And basically, they translating what is the basic mission of these universities and higher education institution, which is accountability towards the student, but also accountability towards the society, and also to demonstrate what is the quality of what they are basically delivering. So I have a few questions from some participants, but before I go to that, I just want to link a little bit to the main theme of this webinar, which is about the master's programs. And this is another challenge, what would be the utility of having or participating in a master program of this to answer some of the questions that we were just discussing? Okay, so what would be a nice research question around formative assessment and this type of subjects that we've addressed here that could be solved in a master program like we are talking about? Maybe John or Eliana. John, maybe can you? Sure, what would be the question you would like answered, let's say?
Well, I think that let's pick. I mean, there's so many questions to be answered that we don't have enough time on the webinar to go through all the questions. But let me talk about formative assessment for just a moment. We really actually know very little about how to do that well. We're just beginning to develop some information about how to provide feedback, but we don't know how to do that. What kind of assessments are appropriate to support that? What will make the biggest difference in learning? How to space that throughout a period of training? There are just 1,000 questions of that kind that I think need to be answered. And one of the advantages of a master's program is that and a community is that it will support the creation of projects, but those projects can occur across different institutions. And that's a really powerful model for moving things forward. One of the downsides, if you will, of some of the research that's currently done is that everybody does things in their own institution. And what you do in an institution is a sample of one. It's like having one patient in a medical study. It's not a broad enough sample to draw real conclusions. So one of the nice things about a master's program is that with set up in a community is that it will attack some of these issues, but it'll attack them from the perspective of several different institutions and provide more generalizable and richer results.
Great. That's a really great thought about the representation and the sampling, which is stronger if we have more diversity and also representative from other realities. Eliana, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I'm from my department is obstetrics and gynecology, okay? And in Brazil, we have the biggest group that is now producing research in this area, in obstetrics particularly, that is my area of expertise, has created a big group. We are the heads of this initiative in our department here. And now we have this big group around the country that can work in different questions. And having a research group that can then work in different questions and move the knowledge forward one from another after the research, each project, I think it's a way to work in medical education that we are not doing yet. So we are kind of delayed in the process. So I think this is one big issue to be overcome, at least in Brazil. I don't know if you have a different experience like in Portugal or in other countries, but I know that is not so commonly seen in the area of medical education. We are trying to start this kind of initiative here with our graduate program at Unicamp, and let's see how we can do that. But another comment that I would make, I also work with WHO in my area of expertise. And what is going on now, it's very nice that we see WHO more and more supporting and asking for projects that are related to education, but not education basically, but translational research. So how to translate what is the knowledge to the practice has a lot to do with things that we do in medical education as well, at research that we do in medical education. So there is now more and more, the link is coming together. So I have been, people are calling me to help with these other projects because it's something in between. So I think it's an important issue to be highlighted here.
Well, thank you. And nice to hear about that. Well, I just want to resonate what you were saying. I mean, I've been participating in national-wide missions here in Portugal, but also international. And we see also from a very local perspective that even from the north of the country of Portugal towards the south, you know, the same thing as different wording or things like that makes it less easy to homogenize in terms of assessment and also in terms of the description of what we have, but also in terms of international, just to think that there are some specialties in the Netherlands that they do not exist here in Portugal, like geriatrics, which is an emerging area, of course, but it's still not a specialty here. So there are different infrastructures, and just gathering this knowledge about people and by participating in these type of networks is relevant for understanding these, understanding the differences and how these impact in actual medical practice from the candidate's perspective. And so moving forward, there is a few questions.
Can I make it just a small comment?
Of course, please.
Well, it's funny how developing medical education is moving forward to the specialties.
Yeah.
This movement in Brazil is very clear. So people started in medical education, like a lot of Faimerians, as we say, lots of Faimerians, and then they are now moving and qualifying the process of education, assessment into specialties. Maybe in US it was the opposite movement, but in Brazil it's going this way.
It's the same here. People are more and more, you know, learning from each other, and from the faculty members we are talking with people in postgraduate education, and they are eager to learn these new techniques, of course, and this type of programs is actually key for this training for these people. I don't know how it is in Brazil, but specifically, but in the postgraduate education here, people are kind of medieval kind of style, you know, you have the director and everything is very honorable and everything else, but it's still a lot of gut feeling and less about scientific awareness of the candidate's performance. But let's move on. We don't have much more time. We have a few questions here about whether both in Brazil and in the United States, what is, let's say, the population of participants in master programs? Are these mainly national participants, both Brazilians coming to Brazil or Americans coming for the United States programs? Or do you have a lot of international students? And what is the key to have internationalization? What is it? Is this relevant for the programs? And how do you, I mean, some thoughts about this? Eliana, can you start this time, please? Sorry, or maybe John?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. So I think the majority of Masters of Medical Education programs around the world serve the local community, serve the folks who are nearby. There are, however, a few programs that have a little bit more of an international scope. So I think the key from my perspective is that first, these programs need to serve the local community in the region, because if you're creating if your goal is to create a community and a network where they don't exist already in a region, then that's the first priority. And I think most programs are focused that way at this point. I think there is also, however, a positive development in that some programs are more international, and so they have the opportunity to create a community that goes beyond the region. So I think both are really important, and I think both exist to some degree or another at this point. I will point out one unfortunate thing, however, and that is that I think that some of the programs are English only in places where English only is probably not the most appropriate thing to do. And so I think attending to language as part of this is really a key piece of help making these useful going forward.
Okay, thank you, John. This is great. Eliana, can you talk a little bit about why the programs are in Brazil?
Yes, it's the same. And because in Brazil, classically, master, what we call master, is pathway for the your academic career. So of course it's more local, but again, we have a different experience when we work as reference for WHO in my area of expertise, not medical education. We are receiving more and more people like from Africa. So the South-South collaboration in our situation, and particularly in Africa, the countries that speak Portuguese, as John said, language is an issue. So we speak Portuguese, and not many countries. We are numerous, but we are few countries. So what happened is that we can collaborate with others, particularly regions or countries that do not have the possibility. But in the era pre-COVID, everything was done in place. What is important to be personally in person somewhere. But now we have another situation that we could collaborate more and bring more people from other areas to share the program with us in a hybrid model that can have on-site and also distance education or participation like HiFlex. I have many people inside the room, but I also have people who can come listening and participating from outside. So this change in Brazil needs to be aligned with the law in education that is kind of old. So we are trying now to move and break the limits.
Okay, thank you. So I have another question, and maybe this will be the last question, but this is very interesting. How can we align master educational programs with sustained research programs in medical education assessment? So I guess this is mainly about the sustainability of the programs and also of the research, and how do we align these? So John, can you jump in, please?
Again, that's a really interesting question. I don't know that I have very many good responses for it. I think that part of the way to align what's happening in education with what needs to happen in practice is to ensure that there are participants from a diverse set of backgrounds that participate in the programs, and that their projects are relevant to the local needs. So one of our goals in Faimer was that when someone came to us, they needed to come to us with the project, and that project needed to be approved by the dean of their medical school or their nursing school or whatever health profession school it is. I wouldn't think that would be the right thing for a master's degree, but I do think that the model of making sure that the projects that folks undertake have local relevance and importance and will be sustained going forward is critical. And I think that depends on filling a local need and ensuring that local leadership buys into the projects and is willing to support them going forward. That's important enough to the institution or the region.
Great, thank you. Yeah, actually answering real questions from the real world is the best motivation to do research. So Eliana, do you have any comments on this, or do you have any recommendations?
In Brazil, we are in the movement in the last years, in general, for graduate education, master and PhD programs, that they have to be more and more close to the community and answering questions from the community. So all the evaluation system for graduate programs, they are inserting indicators that show that this is happening. So it's a big, it's a pressure over the programs to move and to start from big questions or big problems like development goals, the SDG things, and then the programs they come after that, they have to compose with needs from the community. So I think this is a way to go, and in terms of medical education as well. What we need is a leadership that put in this very on stress into our system of graduate evaluation system that is into CAPS. CAPS is the center that evaluates that in graduate programs. So if we have them very clear, the committee on this area that says loud and clear, then the programs will be very aligned. And so I think it's a movement we are going through.
Well, thank you. I think that we have, our time is up. So I would just like first, in my name, of course, in the name of Professor Nuno Souza, our dean, to thank both Eliana and John for their time and for sharing this knowledge and their thoughts. And also to thank all the participants that were participating and witnessing this webinar. I hope you enjoyed this. And we have so Beatriz has just left the link for more information if you have from our website, and you can contact us at any time about these and other programs and about the webinars. This is also the last webinar for this first series of webinars on medical education and assessment. And again, thank you, John, and thank you, Eliana, for being here with us and for sharing your knowledge. And I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose.
And thank you all for being there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you
Bye-bye.
all that have been here.